having access to Kew Gardens and without really being able to afford to pay any researchers, I really could do with getting some more information on legal cases. But I've found through reading about the Star Chamber, I already knew about the Painted Chamber, but I've been reading about the Star Chamber in Parliament. So there's this case, this Burton and Bastwick, the Burton and Bastwick petitions, which were just sort of like around just before the start of the Civil War and going into the Civil War. These are two kind of like, I would say, clergymen or priests. One of them's a physician as well. And they get prosecuted basically for certain religious opinions and views being published. One of them nearly ends up becoming the Archbishop, close to becoming the actual Archbishop. They end up getting prosecuted through this commission court, which is quite a high court in government, for these publications. And they use the right to petition to change, to basically get the, not appeal, but the petition, it's they kind of immediately petition. This petitioning the king is always kind of been there because there's not always. It's kind of like to do with the fact that you don't really always have a parliament, and you don't always have normal courts. The commission court's a high court anyway, but when they get put before this high court, they refuse to take these oaths, and instead they petition the king. So basically they're moving, and so they are basically jumping court, but it's not like an appeal, like the Appeal Like Jurisdiction Act. It's kind of like they're asking it to be. You could always have this right to petition the king, but they didn't turn up. They got the hearing in the Star Chamber, which is where they apparently had these hearings for the King's Bench for the petitioning the king, right? But they didn't turn up, these people, and they got convicted, but they got sent to prison. But they also had their ears cut off as well, which is quite gruesome. And wives weren't allowed to visit. Sometimes, if you got put in certain prisons, people's wives could go and live with them in the prison, and they could still have access to writing paper and certain things like that. But they got sent to remote places like the Isle of Scilly or Guernsey, this Lancaster Castle or whatever, and things. But so what actually happens is, these are two examples. Well, firstly, they're an example of they use this right to petition to get their case kind of like raised up to a higher jurisdiction, but not by appeal, not because they got convicted and they want to appeal it. They did it like as soon as they're charged, or as soon as while they're in the court, sort of thing, which you're meant to be able to do with the right to petition. But they still got convicted anyway at the Star Chamber. But the thing is, both these guys, Bestwick and Burton, their wives petitioned Parliament for their release, right? And they get released. Parliament orders them to be released. So you this is even before the right to petition, before you even got the right to do it without being held to any commitments, right? You can petition House of Commons. Now, there's meant to be loads of law and stuff to say that, the Commons can't make judicial orders and blah, blah, blah and all this. But I don't necessarily think that is true, because, that Appeal Like Jurisdiction Act with, that set out procedures for petitioning the House of Lords with a prayer and so forth, higher appeal. When Gordon Brown repealed that act was only really made because there were some issues in the jurisdiction for Scottish Parliament and the Courts of Appeal of Scotland. And it only came about after the King's Bench ceased. You definitely do not need the Appellate Jurisdiction Act at all to petition the King or to appeal to the House of Lords. And that is for certain, because this is before the Appellate Jurisdiction Act was even written and before the right to petition. And this is even before the 1661 Tumultuous Petitioning Act as well, right? Which is really important. Now, the thing is that with both these cases of Burton and Bastwick, their wives end up getting petitions. The Burton guy has got a large church following. He's like a priest, and he's got like a big congregational following. And when he got sent to prison, they had like procession of all these, churchgoers and so forth. But both these guys got their ears cut off, which is quite gruesome. They later got released. And then one of them ended up fighting in the Civil War, and they meet other prominent people who end up in the Civil War. A lot of them have got religious arguments and issues, and some of them even with the parliamentarian side, it turns out, later on. But the important thing here is this, right? I also get a mention of this Triennial Act, right? So the Triennial Act, I have read the Civil War book, but I read it a while ago. And I know more now than I know then. So this Triennial Act 1641 was passed mandating the summoning of Parliament every 3 years. In May, the King's power to dissolve the Long Parliament was removed. Charles was forced to accept both bills. Meanwhile, the Commons relentlessly investigated the legal basis of the King's official experiment. So there were a lot of committees doing certain investigations, which you can petition and they can call up people to give evidence and so forth. But the thing is that, so in the short parliament, there was this short parliament, and it turned out that Bedford, this character Bedford, one of the people in the House of Lords from Cambridgeshire, he was it turned out that he was quite much against the King. He didn't last that long, Bedford, but he was one of the King's main opponents in the House of Lords, but he gets smallpox and dies quite early on. And then you've got this John Pym, who was like one of the main parliamentarians in the House of Lords. He's meant to be one of the greatest, apparently, members of the House of Commons ever, but he doesn't actually last till the end of the Civil War, only really towards the start of it, John Pym. But John Pym is... This long parliament is the parliament that lasts longer, and then from then on, they're meant to have it every 3 years, and the King can't dissolve it, because remember, they didn't have parliament. Now, when you don't have a parliament, right, this is really, 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 really important, because when you don't have a parliament, I'm not saying that I'm a scholar on this, because I don't have access to Kew Gardens. There are a lot of historians and, people in government who do study this, but there are also a lot of people in government, like the cabinet and ministers, who don't study it. There are a lot of people in the Ministry of Justice and in the House of Lords who probably will know every single letter and syllable of this whole thing, right? But as far as we're concerned, right, on basic principle, the fact is this: if you don't have a parliament, and if you don't have elected MPs, right, it's just the people, right? It's just the people, and then the King, and the King's Council, and then the King's Justices. But, importantly, with all these courts, the public can be sworn in as justices of the peace. Some of the church people were judges and they had courts. And importantly, you've got a jury, right? Now, obviously, you've got lords, knights, people, peerages. You've got the whole ranking order of the royal family and awarded people, and then priests. But then you've got the common people, the public, right? Now, the thing is, in proper due legal process and proceedings, you have the jury, which is meant to be the common people, and you've got the justices who are meant to be representing the crown, right? But notice that you can have a trial with a judge, and you can have a trial with a judge and the jury. Apparently, there's some discretion. But so the thing is, if you were getting, court cases and trials, you likely can have a jury. But if not, it's the King's Justices. But obviously, as you work up and you get to the higher courts and so forth, you end up like with 3 justices, which are all the King's represent, and then you get into Lord Chief Justice and whoever, But the thing is that it's the King and the King's Justices, right? But you can always petition the King. But back then, petitioning, you could do it, right? But you didn't have this protection, or necessarily, they were punishing people for their opinions and views and certain things they were asking, and all manner of things, right? But this is while the printing press is evolving as well, remember, and people are starting to get into doing pamphlets as well as books and stuff. The thing is, right, and remember, women have got right, so you're not electing MPs, right? So the women have got the right to petition the King as much as the men. So this whole issue with, when we start electing people to the House of Commons, apparently women couldn't do that. They couldn't, vote. But really, voting for an it's not even that old anyway, if you think about it. The suffragettes' cause, in early 1900s and so forth, it isn't even really, in the early 1640s, you haven't even got a parliament half the time anyway. So 1640, 50, 60, 70, 17, 18, it's only 200 years of this whole, women can't vote thing anyway, because you're lucky if you could get someone, a representative in Parliament or whatever. So we're doing it all directly yourselves, really, Now, the thing is that the Commons is meant, the whole name of it, it's meant to be the House of Commons, right? It's meant to be the common people elect a representative who's going to represent them in the Parliament, in the House of Commons. And there weren't even 2 chambers at one point. They only made both of the 2 separate chambers at a certain point as well. Now, the thing is that, so really, your elected MPs, members of the Parliament in the chamber, really, they are meant to kind of really be almost like the jury, really, if you think, as opposed to the House of Lords, are all justices. But if you think about it, in a court, a jury can make a verdict, because they get sworn in. And the thing with the House of Commons is that, so in the early 1640s, we've got these situations where, and by the way, they're only just starting to establish these parliaments every 3 years properly. So people are petitioning, rather than petitioning the King, they're actually petitioning the Parliament. Now, if you ain't got a Parliament, you can't petition it, right? Particularly if it's not a long Parliament, if it's a short one, right? So if it's a long one, and if the King can't dissolve it, this is like a new jurisdiction. It's actually extremely significant in this whole saga. This Perennial Act, the Triennial Act, or this permanence of Parliament, because then your Commons, you can actually petition either of the Houses or the King. It's got the Palace of Westminster jurisdiction. Now, the thing is, you might say, well, a justice is meant to be the representative of the King, but then you've got the jury. Now, apparently the judge can say we're not going to have a jury, right? Or he can have one. Depending, you always get a jury in Crown Court, but apparently they're saying that if they want to not have a jury, they're saying they can not have it. But this is the thing. Now, we know from this Burton and Bastwick petitions, once you start getting into this Burton and Bastwick, right, it starts telling you the whole thing, procedure-wise. Now, These Burton and Bastrick's wives, on separate occasions, they petitioned for the release of their husbands, right? To the House of Commons. So it says, and they got released from prison. So you tell me that you can't petition the House of Commons over legal cases. Now, this is even before 1661 Tumultuous Act. This is even before the Bill of Rights, the right to petition. You can't be held to any commitments or prosecuted, right? And even before the Appellate Jurisdiction Act. So you can do it without those acts. You don't even need them, right? So, and apparently you got a good chance of getting, released by the House of Commons, because it's like they're elected by us to represent us. They're not the King's Justices, and so forth. So it's kind of almost a little bit like, Extinction Rebellion, get 50% acquittal rate from juries, It seems to be like in the early 1640s, just before we're going into the Civil War, that when you actually manage to get a parliament and manage the king not to dissolve it, and you manage to get people elected into the parliament, Commons, like John Pym and people like that, it seems that if people have been convicted by, the justices or the Star Chamber or whatever, it seems like these people are getting they're getting their orders overturned by the Commons, by our elected people, the equivalent of like Jeremy Corbyn or whatever, Andrew Bridge, an MP, people like this, right? So now they've got that authority and power. Now, they're saying at some point that they made some legislation, to so the House of Commons, can't make orders or judgments or whatever, or do things. But I'm not too sure whether they can do that or not, because the main thing is that the 1661 Tumultuous Act, it talks about when you're getting prosecuted, but not about when you're bringing the petitions in the first place. They get checked. They were getting checked unless they were over certain many signatures. And the thing is that from 1688, and then they abolished the King's Bench. So where are you going to get prosecuted if it's not in the Star Chamber or by King's Bench? Either you can't be prosecuted at all, or it's saying, even in a lot of the election petitions rules, it says that it's got to be the High Court if you end up getting prosecuted, even if you can be prosecuted yourself. But when you're bringing a case, you're meant to be bringing it like when the police bring a case, you've got certain powers. This is the thing. Now, so they were actually people were petitioning the Commons for release. And I can't see how you can stop someone doing that. At least you could do it without any of the other acts. It was just like, it was because the jurisdiction of the building, of the place, it's what it is, the Palace of Westminster, right? It's to do with a existing jurisdiction. I don't see how you can remove that jurisdiction, because it's almost like lifting the World Heritage status from Stonehenge. They're trying to remove the World Heritage status so they can dig a tunnel. But how can you remove a jurisdiction from a Palace of Westminster? Because then it wouldn't have any jurisdiction anymore. It won't be able to do anything, would it? Either you can do stuff or you can't. Now, when they say, you can only do certain things, but you can only do that. You can only pick and... It's not about pick and mix. It's about either you have the authority or you don't. Now, the truth is that, for example, like the Inquiries Act creates a court and it creates a special jurisdiction for investigating important matters, and it gives this special court, but only has a chairman and a board, and they can direct proceedings. And if there are any legal matters, they have to refer them to the courts, High Court, which can do criminal and civil. Now, the thing with Parliament is that it's actually the committees, right? Like the Petitions Committee has got Standing Orders 145A, which gives it certain court powers, like the Inquiries Act, in a way, extremely similar, if not near identical. And that's the committee giving those powers. That's not the chamber, or differentiation between the House of Lords and the House of Commons. If they're dishing out powers through standing orders, right, I can't see how you can remove powers of the chamber, because the thing with Parliament is it's a jurisdiction. In the first place, I don't see how you can strip back powers from Parliament. I don't really see how it can be done. I'd like to see what Act did it. I'd like to see how they pulled it off, because if going on, I'm going to look into this. This is important to discover, because going on their track record of other things they've done, like Magna Carta and the Petition of Right, and then stripping stuff out of there when it literally pulls down the whole thing, because you can't, half of the things they've done you can't do, like taking away the requirement to follow legal due process before you can have your things, your house or possessions deposed off you without lawful due process, things like that. The whole thing doesn't work anymore. And also, going on with Gordon Brown with his Appeal Like Jurisdiction Act, that you don't even need it in the first place. It's like some kind of Scottish spoiler on the back of, it's like some kind of like air inlet on a bonnet, or some kind of like fender or something that is not needed in the first place. They only had it because they had a legal dispute, an argument about jurisdiction for appeal, mainly Scottish barristers. And the thing with like the Tumultuous Act, the thing with that 1688 bill and the Scottish one is very, very, very explicitly clear. If you are the plaintiff bringing the case, and we're not talking about appealing a charge, no charge to start with, we're not talking about any appeal of any existing charges, we're talking about, setting the foot on the path, like, you can't be put in prison for it. You're not allowed to be imprisoned for anything to do with that engagement at all. You can't be put in prison. And also, you can't be held to any commitments. Now, the thing with petitioning the king, it says that it is widely regarded as both houses, or the actual king in the Star Chamber, from those 1641. But why weren't they, if they, I'm going to, straighten this out now, because I've just got a figment now, not a figment, a clarification in my head, right? Riddle me this then, right? It's an equation. If you are convicted, or if you're up in front of this merchant court in a high court, and you therefore say, right, well, I'm petitioning the king, and it goes to the Star Chamber, and you get convicted in the Star Chamber, in Parliament, and you get your ears cut off and sent to prison, right? How can you appeal that, even with the House of Commons, right? No, the House of Commons some woman gets a petition to the House of Commons, not Lords, right, who've been convicted, and who actually got their sentence overturned by the House of Commons, right? Now, in the 1700 Act of Settlement, it says that you can't have a pardon from a conviction by Parliament, right? So from the 1700 Act of Settlement, which is quite important because that is protecting us from having his rights taken away by the World Health Organization, what we're attempting to do. But also I noticed that as well in the Act of Settlement, I noticed that it says that you can't, if you get convicted by Parliament, you can't appeal it, right? But that was but you could before. In fact, you were getting convicted in the Star Chamber by the King's Court, and then people were getting their conviction overturned by John Pym in Parliament. That's like basically getting Charles sticking you in the Isles of Scilly in a castle with your ears chopped off from the guy who's got the biggest ears in the world, probably world record. And then that's like Jeremy Corbyn and Andrew Bridgen acquitting you and clearing you in the House of Commons and John Bercow. So riddle me that one, right? Riddle me that. So how would the Lord Chief Justice figure that one out? Apparently not after the 1700 Act of Settlement, because you can't, if you get convicted by the Parliament, you can't pardon it. Now, this is why we don't see all these Donald Trump impeachments over here. This is why they're being very, very quiet. This is why Boris Johnson is standing down. This is why everyone's standing down. They're like Skittles. You know, it's like temping bowling. Boom, knock them over and they'll rack them back up again. You know, they just disappear. Where did all the skills go? Not into prison. You know, rack them and roll them. All these shadow ministers and people who 15 Tory ministers stood down. Who are they? I've never heard of them before. 15 Tory ministers stood down. But which ones? The next, couple of years, about 18 Labour ministers stood down. Did they? But we're not getting these convictions, prosecutions, because if they get convicted, and this is what they did from 1700, you can't appeal it. They can't appeal. Can't be pardoned. Now, that's not to say that you can't get convicted by the Magistrates' Court, then appeal it to the Crown Court, then appeal it to the High Court, and then appeal it to the Supreme Court. Well, obviously, you could have appealed it to Parliament by petition, but then if they don't, and then that's it, that's the last one. Can't be pardoned. But it could have been before 1700, which is not the greatest deal, really. Now, to say that they've got more Lords in the House of Lords than they've got lard in the fridge, we've never seen as many people in the House of Lords, and we've got more and more MPs now, and none of them can be bothered turning up in the chamber. None of them turn up. They're debating these World Health Organization, like what Dr. Tess Lowry's got. No one turns up. What's the point in having them? What are these people doing? Oh, far too busy, important things to do. Well, shouldn't they be busy? Shouldn't they be in these committees? Looking at this, committees looking at that. They should be busy beavers. Particularly when back then they only had a coach and horses and a pumpkin to ride in. And now they've got, wanting high-speed HS2 or, fly me in a helicopter, I'll be back for breakfast or whatever they're doing. This is the thing, but yet now we're not even getting access to the MPs. So apparently, I can't see how they can stop you from petitioning Parliament about legal case, because it's free subject. How it works by free subject matter of anything you want, including any existing cases or matters or anything under government jurisdiction. All this Ministry of Justice shadow business is a load of bollocks. It's crock. It's a crock. It's an absolute crock. We've got 1641. We've got people convicted by the Star Chamber in the King's Court, in Parliament, getting their ears lopped off, getting the Charlies lopped off, and then stuck in the Scilly Isles, and then their wives are getting petitions for them to be released, and then it's actually John Pym in Parliament who ends up actually getting them out of there, right? Elected MPs before all this corrupt, deeply corrupt Tory corporate vanguard empire. When you actually got proper people who are, they get elected by a local area, and they're actually there to represent people, not some party, pumpkin that Boris Johnson's going to illegally, or whatever. This is the problem. And so, really, the MP, the members of Parliament, how I'm looking at it now, it's almost kind of like, it's a little bit like these sort of like Gail Bradbrook trials with a jury or whoever, these Extinction Rebellion trials with a judge, a justice and a jury, and then the jury kind of like acquit them, it's almost kind of like that with this Bastwick and Burton cases by petition, because the Commons are the normal people who have been elected in there, So 1688, 1689, 1690, 1688, 89, 90, and then another 10 years, 12. So they decide, so we had like 10, 11 years, and then they decided that they weren't going to let people appeal if they'd been convicted by the Parliament. But that's for appeals, though. We're talking about if you're bringing a case in the first place, if you're the one who's, if you're a plaintiff and you're the one with the case, right? You're the one. You're the one bringing the charge or the dispute or the grievance to the government, right? And that's different. This is not appealing, when you're not bringing a case, when you're just going about normal life and then you break the law. This is all about like when you've already engaged in proceedings to the government. So, and really the petitions committee is supposed to back you up. The thing is, they're doing freedom of information requests, but they are not giving support for function. That even though they're publishing it, that they're publishing directions and they're citing platforms to use, but they're not giving any support. They're giving zero support. In fact, they've been actually working against us. They've been pulling stuff down with 77th Brigade, with the army undercover. The Big Brother Watch has been pulling them up on. So instead of getting support, we've actually been getting anti-support. We've actually been getting unsupport. And this is where I am with my YouTube channel. I'm with my 38 Degrees petition evidence. 38 Degrees don't have a right to interfere in people's casework. It's almost kind of like if you had like, it's kind of like a private mail company or something, and you're sending letters to courts, and the private mail company runs off with your letters or something like that. There are certain things that need to be facilitated. We aren't getting any support. And worse than that, they're even rejecting things that you clearly have got a right. And the thing with that, I've challenged them. What law are you using? They said, we aren't using any law. Rubbish. Why would you publish in your website then? How are you even publishing it? What directions are you giving it through? Well, what is it on a digital Parliament website through? Well, it's a Class F Town and Country Planning Act and a digital device. This is it. They don't even know what they're doing half the time. And it shows when they have these debates and no one turns up. That is where we are with it. That is the engagement level. This is like, the odd MP. We've got that Danny Kruger or whatever he's called, and this, we've got Bridge and a few others. Some of them are Conservatives, some of them are Tories. I'm not saying all Tories are bad. So, I'm quite surprised Jeremy Corbyn didn't turn up. I didn't notice him speaking in those. You would have thought that he would have been there at those talks. So, so I'm just about to read this other thing, the petition of 12 peers. I've got to read that. And I wonder if they're trying to make out that 1700 Act of Settlement is the reason why Parliament can't make orders or judgments, because the comment, you don't need that Appellate Jurisdiction Act. If you can petition the Commons, you could in 1641 to get a order overturned that was made by the Lords, then I don't see how the Commons can say they can't make orders. Now, the Appellate Jurisdiction Act, I think that was the early 1700s, and there was about 3 or 4 of them. And so when that 1700 Act of Settlement, you can't get a pardon. So that bit, what they were basically saying was, if you got convicted by the Parliament, then you can't get the Commons to let you back out again. They wanted to they stopped that. But then you got this Appellate Jurisdiction Act, which is like, if you get convicted even by the High Court or Crown Court, or Assizes, even it was called then, the Assizes, Hundreds Courts, Assizes, and there's quarter sessions. But then there was the King's Bench. But the King's Bench pretty much ends with when you get this Bill of Rights, that the King's Bench, as it was referred to at the time it was written, that's poof, just gone up in smoke, that. So, and that was before all the Star Chamber stuff. The Star Chamber stuff was all before all that. So, the Appellate Jurisdiction Act, by a prayer and a petition to the Lords. But people were getting prosecuted by the Star Chamber and getting it overturned by the Commons before 1700. But then this Appellate Jurisdiction Act, that is for... So they're saying you do it to the Lords and not the Commons. But who's to say that you can't do it to the Commons, though? You see, that Appellate Jurisdiction Act, if you've already been charged of something and you want to appeal it by a prayer and a petition, and there's Appellate Jurisdiction Acts, but the thing is, you didn't need them when they weren't there. Whether they're saying you can only do it that way, but why can't you get it overturned by the Commons? If you didn't need that in the first place, it just says that if you do get convicted, And the thing is, those petitions to Parliament, for the release or whatever, that's not rehearing a case or anything like that. It's not really like, okay, you're appealing something, then you have a hearing and you go to court, blah, blah, blah. They're actually, I get it with the whole Star Chamber and the whole, Appellate Jurisdiction Act and like proceedings and blah, blah, blah. But we're talking about like, they got convicted by the Lords, and then the wives said to the Commons, we want his husband's releasing, and they did. So, but that doesn't really necessitate, it's just a request, isn't it? Well, I don't see, if you've got the power, what powers, I'm going to try and find out by exactly what restrictive powers that they put on there. Because, if they're saying, it's the Appellate Jurisdiction Act, that this is the jurisdiction of appeal, right? But there was already another, I'm quite certain, this might not sound convincing at the moment, but I can assure you that there's a lot of things they've done that it's very, some of the things they've been doing is less than convincing, if not corrupt and wrong and in error, So, this is the thing. It's shabby, the whole thing. But we're talking about, for us, we're talking about actually as a plaintiff, as a claimant, what powers have you got as a claimant? That then they're trying to make out we don't have any, but they do. We do. We do have powers as a claimant, and that's the major difference. And for example, I've got a case at the moment which is actually, it's an investigation. Mine's an investigation. Now I've got an investigation open, which is an investigation. You can actually have an investigation in the High Court. And I'm starting to get into the fact that I think that I should be able to use certain powers to compel evidence and certain things. If it's my investigation, it's my case. And I'm starting to think that they can get judges to make orders and do certain things to compel evidence, which, I've started to approach my MP, because really the House of that I'm complaining against the House of Commons Petitions Committee because it is an authority, at least in the same way as the Inquiries Act creates an authority, and if it could and should be under the jurisdiction of the Judicial Investigations Office under its 145A powers. And you might say, well, don't they have a committee for that? Oversight committee, like, the Privileges Committee or something. Well, I guess it's the Lord Chief Justice in a way. That's what the Judicial Investigations Office is. It's headed by the Lords, just like the Supreme Court only works because it's got 3 members of the House of Lords in it. It's really mainly to do with the fact that they're members of the House of Lords. Really, theoretically, I'm going to try and find out what they've actually done with the House of Commons, unless it is the Appellate Jurisdiction Act that filtered it away. But there's got to be something to do, like 1986 with that old tumultuous act, and then Gordon Brown with his petitions committee online and all this. I'd be interested to know exactly by what means or method they claim they've taken away the House of Commons powers, because your MPs are meant to be representing the common people with the same capacity in view, in a way that a jury appears in a court, really. And you see, the jury gets sworn in, and the jury can make order, because even though the judge is the person who makes the order, but the jury can decide. But then they go back to normal life, after it's over, after they're discharged. Now, the thing with the Commons is, when those MPs get elected and they're given power, I've actually read this more recently, there is an authority, and you don't have to be on the petitions committee for that. And there's certain things that they can do and sign off, and they have, that I think they're being kind of like dumbed down with, or that they've been, in a way, misled. And that is what we really need to get into. If you are investigating something, if you are wanting an inquiry, you see, a minister can, if a minister, sees evidence that there should be an inquiry, they can initiate them. Same with Secretary of State, for these referendums. The Secretary of State has got the power to have referendums, once you achieve the requirements for it, but they're not doing it. So if Mark Harper is trying to evade and get out of giving over the right to local referendums on very important matters when there's afforded by waiting signature for Stonehenge Tunnel, for Shropshire Darwin Oak, for in Wales with the 20 mile an hour speed limits, and whatever other questions you want on the referendum for 50 mile an hour, or 15-minute cities, or charge zones, ULEZ, whatever questions you want on those referendums. And Mark Harper's not even doing that. Then these MPs don't bother turning up at half the debates. If you are doing an investigation for an inquiry, or petitioning for something important in the law change, and you need to get evidence or obtain evidence or do something like that, the petitions committee has got powers, and you should be able to, what's the freedom of information? I want, the MPs have got access to Andrew Bridgens, we've got access to the Library of Parliament. It's the most, amazing library, and, all the wealth of information, anything you could want to know as an MP when you're elected as an MP, anything you want to find out, anything you want to know is all in the library. Well, what if it's not in the library, Bridgen? What if it's not in the library? What happens if it's in a lab in Calcutta? Or in Rand Paul's closet, in his sock cupboard, or in some yet unknown witness's head that I haven't yet interviewed and obtained a statement for, but is critical to the rights and privileges of the realm, or the security, or an investigation or inquiry into Hillsborough. We'll do that when we get the inquiry, but I have to prove that there's enough evidence to have an inquiry. Never mind, getting the chairman of the inquiry to direct it. It's like saying getting a police to direct a courtroom when he's not caught a criminal. When there is nothing. There's nothing until you have something. They have got powers, and they don't want to give support or access to powers. It's like if it's like if the police, right, doing the job, right, and they're going after criminals, and then they arrest someone, and they think they've got drugs in the house, and they go to the court, and then the police chief or the police officer goes, okay, we need a warrant, and then the judge just tells them to fuck off. Oh, excuse me, Your Honour, can I have a warrant to search this premises? No, fuck off. Fuck off. You're not having a warrant. Can we compel evidence? But the thing is, it makes me laugh. All this subpoenaing in court. So I've got a civil case. Can we get Kit Kat, can we get Sabina Coca-Cola's secret recipe, because they copied it off the back of my sketchbook or whatever, can we compel them? Can you make them, send it in? This is the thing, the police are taking people's drones, they're seizing people's equipment on site, no court order, no warrant, no nothing. I see you. I believe reason to believe you are doing a crime. I'm taking your drone off you, for X month, and then when you get it back, all your shit's gone, all your files have been deleted, all your material, all your videos gone. One of the police, what's that part of it? So they don't need to write to the court for that. I'd like to see what Mark Rowley would do if, all of the lawyers in London suddenly grabbed police officers and took their equipment off them and said, we have reason to believe that you broke the law. We need to, inspect your taser for fingerprints, and then just took all the equipment off them, right? And then took it back to the solicitors, locked it in the cupboard, and started going through all the police video recording. But they can't go through the police camera recording because all the video is not saved on the camera. It's uploaded to Skynet in a remote server. So no matter how much you grab a police officer by the ear and dangle him upside down or whatever, or take his camera off him, even if you believe he's committed a crime, you can't actually get hold of that video footage because it's all up in the master command center and he doesn't have it on him. So if we wanted to investigate the police, we wouldn't be able to seize it off them unless we did get a court order, because they ain't going to let you into the police station, to get it unless you get a court order. And it's unlikely that they're going to even comply with the court order. YouTube don't comply with court orders. Facebook don't. I've been issuing documents now compelling the BBC and YouTube. It's laughable to them. They're in a castle in the sky. They're in the metaverse. They're like on Zuckerberg's Hawaii Island. These people, like they say, Larry Fink not Larry Fink, Sergey Brin, people, they're not scared of courts. They laugh. It's almost like, some of these people in this Burton and Bastwick, after they've been convicted, they lock themselves in their houses and they have to send the sheriff or constables round with the Iron Crows to break into there. But if it was Pontefract Castle, it'd be different, If Pontefract Castle had been your house in 1640, and if you'd have locked yourself in your house, then you would have been able to laugh at them out of the window. They would have had to siege you. You would have had to, Mark Rowley would have had to do more than get a couple of coppers round, with, steel toe cap boots, kicking the door in. They would need to, if Pontefract Castle would have been your house, if you'd have bought it, you could lock yourself in there, permanently. They would have had to have got a siege, they would have actually had to get siege weapons to get in. And I don't know if they had siege weapons in the Civil War, because they didn't have a proper army at that time. They only had those things backwards to the medieval period. I don't even know if they had siege weapons at that point. They probably did have some, but they've had to go get the siege equipment. That is kind of like what was going on between these different after the Norman Conquest, sieging castles, different kings and rulers and jurisdictions sieging castles, this is the thing. And this is now really where we are with YouTube and Facebook. They've got themselves these fortresses and they're dictating like rulers. And the government kind of likes it. In fact, they're kind of working with the government, and the government are actually directing them to illegally inhibit us, illegally incapacitate us, illegally remove posts, information, statements from Facebook groups, unlawfully petitions, signatures. Mark Zuckerberg, blocking Messenger after you send 40 messages, and so forth. We're kind of being it all appears to be, above board and civilized. Oh, look at this new fancy new software and Facebook, social media, but it's not. There's no support. There's no enforcement. Only if someone's, called you a gay lesbian, and the police are giving support to people who they call victims, but we're being victims when we're actually supposed to be doing certain things, right? The police do not have an interest in support, mainly because the causes that we need support in are opposing the police, and they're even going as far as to use their force to arrest us. It's like cop versus cop, and we're the cops we ain't got equipment. We're the cops without equipment. We're the cops without courts, without lawyers, without really much funds or money. And we are opposing these surveillance cameras at the council chamber meeting over the table that the police chief's wanting to commission and get put in. And we're at the council table opposing him. But on the way to the council meeting, he's having you arrested. And fined, and you have to pay a ULEZ charge on your way to the council meeting. By the time you get to the council meeting to get to the table with Mark Rowley over the council table, he shafted you $12.50. I'm on my way to the council meeting to debate with Mark Rowley in the back room over whether we should have surveillance cameras and facial recognition. And Mark Rowley's just flashed me $12.50 on the way to get there. Oh, now I can't afford to go. Oh, what a shame. Mark wins, you lose, I thought that you'll put down expenses for this or what? This is the thing. It is unfair. It's like an unfair advantage. This is the problem now with the police, because, they're actually, when you're going out promoting the petitions and trying to get evidence of public support, you're getting fined. ULEZ charges. The police are trying to, when the police are going around gathering evidence of public concern for crime, yet the police aren't being charged for bus journeys. They just waltz on there. I'm a police officer in a dandy uniform on the bus, ding-a-ling-ling, looking for people, looking for evidence of people on mobile phones, ding-a-ling-a-ling, right? No charge. Why isn't the bus driver charging them? So I'm on my way to the council meeting to oppose Mark Rowley's facial recognition cameras. Oh, I've just been charged on the bus. I've just been charged by ULEZ fine. I've just been charged for parking. Charge. I can't even get there, let alone cast the white glove around, I'll strike Rowley with a glove and cast it down on the floor. Can't get there. I'll probably get charged for that as well, In fact, I've just read through this Burton and Bastwick cases that one of the friends, his father was the last man, apparently to claim trial by combat in the 1640s. It was one of the last people in court or in a judicial dispute that he claimed the use of trial by combat. Apparently he can have it. And then he was the last person to use it. And then later on, I think someone else invoked or used it in the 17th century. After that, I don't know what act or law it's governed in, but apparently it exists and you could have it. You can have trial by combat, which is quite interesting. I wonder if the ULEZ people are kind of self-invoking trial by combat. In a way, Extinction Rebellion are. They're kind of almost like, because if you think that if you could do that, which apparently someone was still doing it in the 1700s. If you can actually call that and invoke it, if there's still a basis for it, then really, wouldn't you be combating the old police force over their surveillance and facial recognition? We say, right, we challenge the police to combat, and if we win, then we're not guilty. Isn't that really the basis of the right to petition then, therefore? And on that basis, then if the police are using truncheons and handcuffs and tasers, the trial by combat is at a disadvantage, because as far as I know, in trial by combat, both parties have to be fairly and equally armed, like in a duel with an equal pistol and, a judge there. Therefore, the police have got communication, walkie-talkies, they're getting access to courts, subpoenas, they've got lawyers paid for them by the public. Where are our lawyers paid for us by the public? Doyle and Morhan is too busy dandying in waterfalls and, daisy fields from, sewage spills, or Tim Crossland's no use. Where are the lawyers? Where are our lawyers? Because the Crown Prosecution Service aren't our lawyers. They most definitely are working for the police. So if it's trial by combat, if it's pistols at 10 paces, then where are our lawyers? Where are our truncheons? Where are our handcuffs? Where are our tasers? We don't have any. So it's not a fair fight, is it, with Rowley? If we are invoking trial by combat against Rowley's police force, the fight for or against facial recognition, then where are, all we've got is the Secretary of State popping up like he's, Doctor Who, going, ooh, we've got all this data and now we're going to use it. Well, as far as I know, apparently we're opposing it, fairly. But it doesn't seem that it's fair at the moment, because, apparently the fully funded police force with armed weapons as well. You've got the right to bear arms for defence. They're even taking plastic spoons off children in the street now, are dangerous weapons. In fact, they brought loads of criminals in for a reason to say that it's dangerous, and then you can't even defend yourself with anything. Soon they'll be chopping people's ears off again. Soon, like in 1641. This is the government. This is why they overthrew the royals, cutting people's ears off, this is the thing, taking people's camera equipment from them. Oh, trial by combat. Now is Rowley, take off your cameras, take your drones off you, take your video footage, take your evidence. It's like in a court, isn't it? Oh, it's a fair trial. Oh, just a minute, you will be taking that evidence off you. You can't use that. Fingerprints prove that I robbed this. Fingerprints to prove that I robbed that. Oh, is there anything else you'd like to take away, Rowley? Any objections to any statements given? Take it all. Take it all. Game, set, match to Mr. Rowley. Have it all. Have all the evidence. Oh, you've got all the evidence anyway on your databases. Have it all. Have it all. We'll see what happens if we had all the evidence, if we had all the conversations of the police officers, if we had all the conversations of the CPS, if we had all of the fingerprints of the police, all of the video footage of all their acts and actions, if we had the lawyers, then we'll see in a courtroom if it was a fair trial. But all they seem to want to do is sweat in cotton shirts, roll sleeves up and flex WWF wrestling muscles and, go after people who are trying to get to work. Fine people, fine. Can't stop here, can't stop there, can't park there, Oh, it's Mark Rowley at the council. I'm commissioning some cameras. Oh, we can't park in that chair. Oh, no, you can't sit there, Mark. You have to move around a little bit. The table's a bit crooked. It's like in a big U-bend. You can't sit there. Be all right if Rowley turns up at the council meeting and he's trying to find a seat. Can't stop there, Mark. No, can't sit there. That chair's for Dave. That chair's for Peter. Oh, you don't have a chair, Mark. You'll have to stand. Well, what a shame. And by the way, it's 50p to stand in this chamber, 50 pence charge. You know, ding, ling, ling, here comes the bus, who pops on the policeman, you know, no charge, no charge. No, it's 50 pence to park yourself at this council meeting. You know, this is it. And then you've got women's groups, you know, in wherever, turning up to take notes at council meetings. Ooh, and then the council are phoning the police on them. Oh, get some evidence on the council now. We're taking notes and making recordings, see what these councils are up to in these chamber meetings. Oh, they'll phone the police on them. You know, the people are turning up at these council meetings to gather evidence. And they're getting the police phoned up on them. This is the thing, because, you know, these people don't actually have a fair trial. And from what I've seen in the magistrates' courts with the cup and ball tricks, stealing, you know, you're not allowed to plead guilty. Not allowed to plead not guilty. Oh, it's too busy in the not guilty room. Too busy in there, you know. It's too busy in those courts with the council tax fees, because apparently there's too many people for them to fit in the day, you know. So there are powers in the Commons that people are not using, and they're not giving us support or access, primarily because of political party culture and grooming. Political party grooming, political party culture, and political party priming through the political parties until they, you know, get you know, grooming. Basically, they're being groomed, and they don't really have a interest in the law properly. So, you know, and I'm going to find out what act claims to have removed the powers of the House of Commons, because actually that I called that 1700 Act of Settlement for this whole World Health Organization thing, and if they're saying that doesn't apply and has no effect to protect our rights from you know, the World Health Organization, then, you know, well, I'd like to see, you know, well, maybe you know, well, maybe we can, maybe you can get maybe apparently you can petition the Commons, even if you get prosecuted by the Supreme Court, you know, seeing that it's in the same act. So, you know, the House of Commons is meant to be there for a reason. It seems like all through the 1600s, it seems like it kind of was a good thing. People were actually getting their sentences overturned by the Commons after a conviction from the King, which is quite interesting. 1688. I wonder if 1688 and an act of settlement. I wonder if that Commons can clear, and they were doing in a lot of cases. I wonder if that equates to the fact that, all right, fuck it, we'll just say that you can't prosecute in the first place if you're the person who's plaintiff bringing it, because that would make sense then, because that would be like, in effect, that prosecution by the King, by the Star Chamber, and then people are petitioning the Commons for them to get released, like these women, and then we're getting, like, you know, 1650 at the end of the Civil War, 50, 60, 70, 80, and then you got 4 years, so it rolls back in, and then they've got Tumultuous Act, but then we've got Glorious Revolution, and it you see, the basis of the moral behind the 1688 bill would sort of explain that those long Parliament petition results, or those well, I don't really know if you want to call it a pardon or not. Usually the king who gives the pardon, but or at least if you're the person, the majority of those people ended up in prison because of when they were wanting to challenge the religion and so forth. So it kind of, I'm starting to think that those John Pym sessions and this Burton and Bastwick's wives really kind of, that really sets out the basis, but their appeals though, but when you think about it, they were cutting people's ears off. It's quite macabre, really. If you had trial by combat, you might have ended with your ears cut off or worse. That's why people didn't choose to have it. But apparently, it's something that apparently exists in the legal system. Maybe they kind of, these people who are a lot more, I mean, we're talking about wild times in the Civil War, but this is what I've said in other videos. I've said that, they used to have trial by combat and, and pistol dueling and stuff. So why would you make a law to say that, you can't be at least liable to the law for your actions? It's quite a bit of a big call, that. But the Scottish Act's backed it up by, you're not allowed to be imprisoned. In a way, maybe they thought that, it can't be as bad as having your ears cut off or trial by combat. We've seen worse. So, maybe they thought that, it was justifiable to make that law. But for sure, I'm sure you can definitely petition Parliament. They're not letting you at the moment. They're saying you can't, but I don't see why you can't collect the signatures for it. I'm going to have a look and see if I can find out which legislation change they're claiming to have made to remove that power from the ministers in the House of Commons, given the fact that most of the committees aren't actually operating on legislation. They're only on standing orders anyway. If you can even remove that power or not.